and we can get started. First of all, let's all make sure we can access the document. I can do screen sharing, but I'm notoriously bad at, yes, Grace, you can jump off 8, but you can watch whatever happens after you're gone. I'm notoriously bad at screen sharing, and so it's always better if we can look at it on our own screens. Let's take a look at the document. So first, what we see is the overview, and I want to explain that when we talk about remote media work, there are really two levels to it. I think in order to do the best possible remote media work, we are involved in the planning process, and that means you attend the planning meetings. You are the media and messaging representative of the group that is working together to put an action on board. It's not always possible just because of scheduling, because of shorthandedness. And so I've designed this template so that in the unfortunate chance that you are the media and messaging person for a planning group and you are unable to attend the meetings, you should still be able to pull it off on the day if you follow the steps in this template. What this template really points us to is on the day of the action, supporting that action. So that means contemporaneous posts on social media. It means press release to journalists and following up with journalists. And it means communicating with the people on the ground so that the information that you're giving either to the press or on social media is as accurate as possible. And that includes a lot of communicating with photographers and videographers to get images that we share. So the day of the action, when we're talking about Remote Media Desk, is the most important day. That's the day when you have to be fully present, and just your job is to get this action communicated to the world. But there is a lot of work that should go into it beforehand in a world where we have control over our scheduling. So we're also going to talk about that stuff before we get into, and now it's the day and you're at your desk and you have to just be there. Yes. So first, let's talk a little bit about the tone and the voice. It's something that we've worked hard on over the past year, especially a year and a half. And our tone is direct, it's honest, it's uncompromising. We try not to sound openly angry. Our tone is like people who feel rage, but who have control over their emotions enough to communicate. And I try to think of it when I'm drafting something as if I am speaking to a friend who I respect, and who maybe I'm not sure if they fully understand the crisis. Like, this is someone who I think is a smart person. This is someone who I think is very capable of grasping concepts, but maybe they just have not yet really been exposed to the things that we're talking about. So far, I think that works. I would say if we're doing a full tweet storm about an action, one or two of them can be really openly rageful, usually directed directly at whatever the target of the action is, whether it is a member of the government or it's a corporate leader who we're targeting. You can allow yourself one truly unhinged, angry text, but we don't want to come off as unhinged, angry people. We want to come off as reasonable people who have been driven to do extraordinary things. And bless you, Brian. Sometimes, I think that it is our job to be an incredibly reasonable voice, because the feedback we get for a lot of civil disobedience is that we are dangerous, crazy, like menaces to society. And it's important to show that we're not. We're very smart and we are tired of being scared. And so we're going to do something instead of being scared all the time. So that's the general tone. I like to think that if you read our posts on social media, that it reflects that. I'm trying to think if we do a quick round on tone, what that quick round would be. Let's just pause. Does anyone have questions or comments or clarification on tone? And you can raise your hand, or if you're Grace, drop a comment. Yeah, Brian.
Just a comment. I appreciated the line communicating as if you're communicating to, I think you said somebody who is aware of the crisis but not well informed. I thought that was walking a good line.
Yeah, I came to that through absolute trial and error because I remember in the early days of Twitter, I read now over my early tweets and I thought, oh gosh, it made it sound like I was treating people like they were really stupid. And I don't think they're stupid. I think people have had different priorities and are just now coming into it. So that I hope that is good. And that's something for us all to remember as we go into it. Great. So let's talk about the early stages of the planning process. It's such a happy time. We're so optimistic about how things will turn out. In the early stages of the planning process, in my opinion, the most important thing you can do if you have the time and the energy and the brain space is to attend planning meetings for the action with this ongoing inquiry in your head of problem solving for messaging. The great thing about our planning groups, I can't speak to other chapters, but for XR Boston especially, is these people are, for the most part, very experienced. They are taking care of planning the steps of the action. They are taking care of planning the outreach and the recruitment. Our job is messaging. And I remember in my early days of attending meetings, I would get really caught up in what their focus of the conversation was because I wanted to be a good collaborator. I wanted to be a good teammate. I wanted to play ball. And it took a number of action planning processes before I realized that my job is to constantly ask about messaging, even if it's not what they want to talk about, even if it's not what they want to focus on. The best thing we can do early in a process is understand, what are we saying? Who is our target? Who is our audience? Without those three questions answered, which action planners sometimes don't want to answer, without those questions answered, we cannot move forward, really. And then once we have those answered, so for example, maybe we're saying no new fossil fuel infrastructure, which is super easy if you're XR Boston, because that's what we're saying lately. And our target, let's say our target is Maura Healey, who is the governor of our state, often our target. And let's say our audience is, what if let's say, just for fun, which we actually haven't done and have no plans to do, what if our audience was like staffers at the State House? Then if we understand that we're trying to convince staffers at the State House to pressure Maura Healey into banning new fossil fuel infrastructure, the question becomes, how are we going to communicate all of these things? How are we going to say what we need to say to the person we need to say it to for the benefit of these people watching? And that can lead us to, I think, that can lead us to an effective action. There are a lot of theories on what can lead to an effective action. I'm not saying this is the only way. I'm saying this is the way that, for me, makes messaging sense. And so you just show up in those meetings and your thought is messaging. And then once the messaging of the action itself starts to settle, we understand the answers to these questions, we get to think about press strategy. And we've had some not excellent experiences with press releases. And so we've learned some ugly lessons, some ugly ways. And depending on the spiciness of your action, to be very careful about when you send a press release and how. If you have trusted journalists who you've built a relationship with, it's worth asking them a week beforehand if they're willing to accept an embargo. And then you can give them a little information. You can tell them the place, the approximate time, the gist of the action, enough that they want to show up to your party. You can give them a little invitation. You don't tell them exactly what's going to happen to the party, but you can invite them to join. If an action is spicy enough, this is my personal opinion, if an action is spicy enough that you think the public will think it is dangerous, if you think anyone who reads that press release might think you're going to hurt someone, don't tell anyone until the moment of deployment, until your colleagues on the ground send you a text and they say it has started and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it but arrest us. Then you can send the press release. I've learned this all of the ugliest possible ways. So it's really up to you. And it is your call to judge for yourself what you think the spiciness level of the action is. and to listen to your colleagues on the planning team who have experience. Always listen to their feedback. But at the end of the day, I think the messaging person has to make the call for themselves based on what they believe it is, and ask people you trust beforehand. But when in doubt, wait until deployment to send that press release, because nothing can go wrong then. There's no risk. I see a hand at a perfect timing. Yeah, Grace.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could kind of give me a sense of like what the yield is in terms of how many articles come out of a press release. Does that differ if you give somebody an embargo versus just release it at the moment of the action?
That's an awesome question. And it's an awesome question because it is so hard to answer. I wish I was able to predict. That's on the recording. I wish I was able to predict what the yield will be. I don't know. What I will say is arrests get more news. When we do beautiful actions, we did a beach funeral. We've done a series of beach funerals, but we recently did a beach funeral. Gorgeous action. There were like statuesque rebels in blue dresses, and there were puppets, and it was made for some really great images. And they were images that got shared a lot on social media afterwards. XR Global really liked it. But we did not get any news because we didn't disrupt anything and we didn't get arrests. So in general, I can predict only to say that we almost never get press coverage right now anymore at this point in our chapter's journey for non-arrestable actions. Earth Day, huge, beautiful, no press. Arrests get press and disruption gets press. And furthermore, flamboyance gets press. Our biggest action of press so far in our chapter's history was this past June. We had some rebels who mooned legislators. And this image of these people mooning in the State House went viral. Our previous record was 80 articles for a single action, and I let the volunteers stop counting after 400. And that's because it was flamboyant. It was outrageous. It was ridiculous. And it's so embarrassing for us as a culture that we have to show our butts to get press for climate change. But here we are. So that's what I will say. What I've learned is I don't want to say it's not worth sending a press release if no one's getting arrested, because yeah, send a press release, of course. But your odds are really low of getting press without something really flamboyant. I'm going to, Grace, is this like a direct response or is this a separate question? Because Brian is also on Stack.
Yeah, this is a separate question, so you can go to Brian.
Yay, Brian.
Yeah, so I know that we have like maybe a spreadsheet or something with our list of journalists. Do we always send it out to the same journalists at the same outlets? Do we ever change that depending on the action, or is it just like a master list that always, you press the button and it goes out to the same emails every time?
I think hearing you ask that question, I think there probably would be wisdom in mixing it up. We have a list of trusted journalists who are always the ones I hit the button to send it to first. But in general, we send it to our full list every time. There's very rarely variation on that theme. Do you have more before I move to Grace? Cool.
All good.
All right, Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was also wondering if you have a sense of the balance on whether the articles are mostly national or mostly from Boston-based publications.
Overwhelmingly Boston-based. I think we have done a good job at getting into the Globe pretty frequently, the Herald, Mass Live, Boston.com. We can get into those handful of times a year. I try to do it every 6 weeks, but we don't always have flamboyant action ready. National is hard. We've hit national a handful of times since the chapter is founded. So by far overwhelmingly local, especially because this is maybe my opinion. This might not be true. I may not have facts and figures, but I think it is because a lot of our targets are state. We do a lot of targeting our governor or state legislation. We don't do a lot of actions targeting Biden or the Senate or the Supreme Court. And so we don't have as much tastiness for national news coverage. People in Texas don't often want to hear about people in Boston yelling at their governor. They want to hear about butts, but we don't have a whole lot of national reach because of our state focus. Check to Abby.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I just thought I'd share a couple things from my experience too with the press, both on both of those questions. Because in XRDC, we're also doing a local campaign, so we hardly ever break into national news like that. You have to have a very direct national tie to something that's happening on the federal or international level in order to get any of those reporters to report on anything. And there's like a handful of exceptions of reporters that might do like a feature on some fight that's happening at the local level in tandem with like other fights that are similar, but that's really rare. I wanted to touch on the, press release. Is it, what's the return? Because I get that question a lot from like people who are in media and people who aren't. To me, the press release, unless you're a really well-known organization, oftentimes a press release is not going to be enough to get like major news stories. They might like reprint part of it on occasion, but like Jamie said, unless it was something that's super flamboyant or there's arrests, they're probably not going to pay attention. But the reason it's still worth it is because it keeps your issue at top of mind for these journalists that you're sending to all the time. Like that kind of stuff. And that's just like one step on this like ladder of engagement and building relationships with press. And press releases can take different forms. Like if there's updates that are relevant to your campaign, you can like send out a 1-paragraph statement that just like gives journalists a quote in the case that they want to quote you about like this update that's related to fossil fuel infrastructure. And then that's where like the additional pitching and stuff that you do around action. And one other thing I found helpful, or that I've been thinking about in terms of letting journalists know ahead of time, especially if you have like a spicy action, is don't give the info like on an email, like get them on the phone to like give their information, because as soon as it's in writing, it's really easy for someone to go and take that and like disseminate it and like say they have proof. Again, I guess they could be recording their phone calls. Like there is always that option, but at least you have that as a safety net. And I was talking to Climate Defiance folks today about how they do their press and comms ahead of their actions, because they do such a great, they're also doing national stuff, but they get a lot of press coverage. They don't let anybody know until like the moment it happens, and they just go viral on Twitter, and then journalists come to them. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought I'd share it in case it's helpful info for anybody else. Check.
Yay, awesome. Does anyone else have questions about, and I think we do circle around to press again later, but does anyone else have questions about like pre-action press strategy? Awesome. I once had an organizer say that you have to wait 7 seconds or until things become uncomfortable, but I always thought it was strange to wait until things became uncomfortable to talk about it. All right. Let's talk about the month of the action. So we're just narrowing in our timeline until we get to the day, and the day is the big day. The month of the action, it's time to start inviting photographers to the action. One of the most important things I have learned from trial and error is attrition rate on photographers is high. Invite twice as many as you think you need. So often I will hear a new media person say, I need photographers, so I invited 3 and they said yes, and I'm done. Nobody. If you need 3 and you invited 3 and they said yes, you need to get 3 more, because on the day before 2 will cancel and on the day of 1 will cancel, and then you'll have your 3. And I have learned it through horrible, horrible mistakes. So invite your photographers roughly in the month before. We tend to use the Signal app for our encrypted communications leading up to an action and for a lot of action planning. If you use a different encrypted app, that's totally fine. In this document, we reference Signal because that's what we tend to use. Make a Signal thread for the action itself. Let the photographers know that on the day of the action, to put media into this thread as fast as possible to get it to you. This is our line to each other. Cherish it. We make Google Drives for photos and videos. This is not the best plan because it's not terribly secure, and we do need to find a better option. And that is on my list of things to do at some point. But for now, we make a Google Drive folder for photos and videos. Share that with your photographers. I like to put a little document for my media mentions in that Google Drive folder so that post-action, I have a place where I can gather all the different links of all the different articles we've gotten. Explain in the Signal thread the timing, the meetup point, give them the Google Drive link, really give them the information that they need in order to do a good job. Then, still in the month before the action, but I like to start doing this 2 weeks, if not a little bit longer before the action, time to draft your press release. We could do a whole other class on how to draft a press release. I have a couple little templates that I tend to work from. It's surprisingly easy to do. It was very intimidating to me for a while, and then you just start making them, and then it becomes easy. What I've learned is the most important things in a good press release, you need 2 quotes from organizers. About a month before the action, drop a message in the organizer's thread and say, hey, I need quotes. And just say, everyone give me a quote. And then from everyone giving you a quote, you will have 3 people who give you quotes, and 2 of them will be very good. And so you get your quotes from your organizers. You need a clear statement of your demands. You need a clear description of the action itself, explaining what happened. I recommend putting that towards the top so that whoever's reading it sees it first. And a clear description of the organizations involved. If who is XR Boston, who is your XR chapter, and who are your collaborators. For example, we did an action with Climate Defiance last month. We do actions with Scientist Rebellion pretty frequently. So explain who your collaborators are so that they don't have to Google your organizations and inevitably get something wrong. Tell them everything. And one of the best advice I was ever given about writing press releases is just write the article. Write the article for them. Write the article as if you were that journalist. And then you send them this beautifully written article and you say, here it is, you can print it. And then if you're lucky, they'll print it and it has all of your language and all of your demands well said. So try to prepare that before the week of the action. Obviously, as things develop while you're getting up to the week of the action and even up until the moment before you send it, continue to edit it. I always recommend getting at least one set of eyes on your press release. Share it with your planning group. Say, hey, can everyone give it a read? Leave some comments in the margins. And then at least they all feel included. And then when the press release goes out, they don't feel like you misrepresented what was happening. If you're in the situation where you are not able to attend meetings, but you have to write a press release, this is the hardest step of the process because you are essentially tasked with telling the story of an action that you did not plan. This is why I go to meetings, but if you can't, get one of those organizers or 2 if you can on the phone and say, I want you to tell me the story of this action. I want you to tell me everything that's going to happen on that day. And I'm going to tell that story. And you do your best and you share that press release with them beforehand and say, please read it because I'm not involved in planning. So I'm telling a secondhand story to a bunch of strangers. And it will be fine. The week of the action, the few days before the action, you get to draft social media, drafting tweets. We're still on Twitter because that's still where journalists and politicians seem to check a lot. In the document, I have a lot of explanations of some of the metrics that I use. I tend to tell people to prepare at least 5 tweets to be sent contemporaneously with an action. Often I only end up using 3 of them, but if I have 5, I don't feel scared that I'm going to run out. This might just be a tactic so I don't get nervous on the day. But yeah, draft 5. And remember to tag journalists. Remember that you can tag lots of them in photos. And so if you don't have room in the tweet body, you can tag them in the photos and they'll still be tagged in the tweet. I highly recommend in the first tweet, well, we'll explain this on the day of, but in the first tweet to include a link to the press release that we post on our website so that anyone who wants to read the full press release can, and anyone who wants to share it can. And the final tweet you're going to send of the day announces arrests. You announce how they got arrested, how many got arrested, the circumstances of the arrest. If there were no arrests, you can say no arrest today, explain why you think that might be. Yeah, Twitter is an important tool. It's having troubles right now. I think it's important for us to start to think about backups, like as a organizing community. But it is still an important tool, and so we have to play the game of Twitter. We also right now have a Blue Sky. That's kind of our Twitter backup. I tend to draft a Blue Sky post as well. I tend to repurpose my Twitter language. I draft a caption for an Instagram post that I will repurpose as a Facebook post and a Tumblr post. Those can be long. I tend to make like little essays that can explain more about the action. I see a hand from Brian. Yes, Brian.
I have written very few Twitter posts in my life. I'm familiar with Twitter, but if you ask me to write news-related tweets, I would maybe struggle with the tone or the length. I just wouldn't know where to start. Do you have any advice for writing tweets to make them sound good, get the highest impact? Maybe I'm overthinking it.
No, this is a good conversation for us to have. I don't know if I know enough to say that. What I think is most important is to use the hashtags that we designed for the action beforehand, or relevant hashtags. Like no new fossil fuel infrastructure is a hashtag we use a lot, kind of action by action, hashtag act now, hashtag Mapoli. I think those are included in this document. My go-to, they're not. It used to be. Well, so there are some go-to tags and tweets that we use. Photos. Actually, that's the answer. Photos and videos tend to get shared more. I try to include some media in every tweet. I try to include 4 photos or a video. In my experience, those get more views than just the text boxes. They tend to be splashier in people's eyes, I guess. In terms of the language, in this document, I say a little bit tweet by tweet. Like the first tweet, you're just like saying this is happening and including a link to the press release. The next 2 tweets explain the action, what we did, why it's interesting, why it's unique, why it's newsworthy. And then if you have a little time and you still have like the action's still going on and you're waiting to hear more things, but you want to keep yourself doing something, send a tweet explaining the overall interests and issues that we're protesting. Why is no new fossil fuel infrastructure important? What has Healy done in the past that has caused us to distrust her? Like, why are we doing we just said we're doing a thing. Here's the thing we're doing. Here's why we're doing it today. And then generally that will take us to the arrest tweet, which is here's how many people were arrested. Here's the circumstance of their arrest. And here's why it's important for us to get arrested. I never draft them thinking of the people who will leave garbage comments, because they will always leave garbage comments. That's just important to remember. You cannot stop them. And then once we've really locked in our press release, which I like to do at least 24 hours before an action, I like to lock in a press release with plenty of time. Once we have it locked in, not every chapter's website is like ours, but I like to publish each press release in our news section of our website of xrboston.org. I will make the draft. I will not publish it, but I make the draft of that article, which is essentially a copy and paste of our press release. And I put the press contact info at the top so that it's there. And when news people go to our website trying to find something, they can find the phone number of who to contact. And then I draft the press release emails. I copy and paste that baby into a bunch of different emails. We send it to our own email address, our immediate email address, and in BCC put the recipient address. Fewer than 100 journalist recipients per email, which is kind of an arbitrary number. When I came in, I was told 25 per email. I thought, I cannot, that's madness. I've now taken it up to 100. It's been fine. I don't want to push it much farther than that. And you leave that in your draft. You look over to make sure the formatting is fine, because sometimes the fonts get funky when you copy and paste. And then you have everything in your drafts. And this should be done the night before. The night before, you copy and paste that press release into the website, copy and paste it into all of your emails. And then you are ready for the next day, which is the day of the action. And I am going to move my laptop and myself to a place where I don't have Halloween lighting, and we will talk a little bit more about the day of the action. But first, does anyone, let's actually do a round of questions. Yeah, let's start with Julie, and then if anyone else has questions, we can popcorn, because I feel like we just talked about a lot of stuff. So Julie, go for it.
All right. So I have, I guess, two questions. Regard sure how relevant this is to like the actions that we tend to do at XR Boston. With us, like, is there a protocol in terms of like how we tend to sorry, my brain. What I'm trying to say is, like, with regards to like repression or like any sort of like negative interactions with police, like I know people have different opinions in like broader like organizing communities about like how much you should kind of pushing that out to like your social media, because like it tends to like maybe go more like be more viral, but maybe can like detract from like messaging or like draw the focus away from the point of the action. So that's my first question. And then second really quick question is just like, how do we like organize like people logging on to like social media accounts and stuff like that?
So first, I will say my internet got very dodgy, and so I think I missed a lot of your first question. I am going to ask you to repeat it. The second question of how we deal with logins, we are pretty tight with our logins right now. I think I'm the only person who has the login to all of our social media. Very few people have the logins, mostly because very few people have volunteered to do things on our social media. I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis. I think if someone's been involved for a little while, they've taken on tasks, they've done enough that if they were an infiltration from the FBI, then at least, wow, they've given a lot to us before they turn us in, I think that person would be allowed to have logins and have that information. It really just comes down to how well we trust the person, how well we know the person. Right now, not a lot of people have any of our logins because not a lot of people have been available to help with social media. That's not a security thing. That's a limited resources thing. And so can you rephrase your first question that I missed because of my internet?
Yeah. Just like, do we have an idea or a protocol when it comes to like if there is any repression or like negative interactions with like police, like how much we sort of want to highlight that because it can be like more but some people think that it like might also take away from like the like message or like the like purpose of the action, for example.
That's an awesome question. So, I mean, I think that you touched on a very important point, which is that our job is to draw attention to the climate crisis, draw attention to the demands of the action. And it can get muddy when we smoosh around our demands to also reference a relationship with the police. In general, if I'm going to say anything about the quality or tone of the arrests, I'm going to give myself one adjective. So that if someone were reading our tweets thinking like, ooh, but were the police mean to them? I've given them some language that can allow them to infer what the quality of the arrests were without distracting from the point of the action. So I guess the answer is we can reference our interactions with police, but very subtly. To allude but not distract. And my internet has caused everyone to be frozen. So, Julie, did you hear that? Was that audible?
Oh yeah, no, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you. Boy, I'm hoping my internet picks up. I keep moving around to try and get it better. Let's talk about the day, which is the second most important time. The most important time is after the action. So the morning of the action, touch base with your photographers, remind them of your action details, remind them of the meeting point, remind them of the folder to put everything into. Just let them know that it's today, you're looking forward to seeing them. Touch base with your action planners. Oh, I should put that in the document. Touch base with your action planners. Let your action planners know that you are there. Ask them if they need anything from you. Let them know that you have the press release locked and loaded and ready to send. That can help them understand that they have support. They have someone on the ground who is like ready to do the job for them. Let them know you've got your tweets locked and loaded. You have your press release locked and loaded. You're ready to make this thing happen for them. Then we get to action execution time. It is the scheduled time of the action. You are at your desk. All of the people are in place. There we go. And the first and most important thing you can do is to calm down and slow down, because press releases are actually meant to be distributed to explain the action. So it's better to send them after the action than too early. So just pause and slow down. Sometimes the timing of the action will run a little bit late and you won't hear from them for a little while and you'll freak out wondering what's going on and why you haven't heard from them. It's okay. They're dealing with something in the moment. You just hold, don't send anything out. Wait until you hear from your on-the-ground organizers. Push them to send you photos and videos. That's one of the most important things you can do. You just have to keep saying to your photographers, drop something in Signal, get me a photo, get me a video, show me what's happening. Even if almost nothing is happening, the more of that media you have, the more that you'll be able to share when it comes time to be able to share it. Then, when you get a cue from the organizers, I am very fussy about this, as Brian knows. I want an explicit text that says, we have deployed, send the press release. And I will not do it until I get essentially those exact words. Because I think one of the most dangerous things we can do is send a press release too early, and then we've tipped off the cops and we are the reason the action has imploded. So when I get an explicit text from my organizers, which we have discussed together beforehand, then you can press send on your press releases. And once you press that send button, the clock starts. Really, before you send the press releases, you are living in a beautiful liminal space where you know that things are developing and you are about to tell the story of them. And so once you send that press release, you are now in the chute of the action. Then once you send the press release, I add the first action photos to the article on the website, and I publish the website. That's the second thing. Press release on the website. And then you can start to tweet. You add the first photos or the video if you want, if you have, to your first tweet. Send out your first tweet. Send out some photos on an Instagram story. That's when I tend to announce on our Keybase, which is the big encrypted group app that we use as a chapter to communicate. I let them know that there's an action happening, that you can follow it on our social media. For most people, it's a big surprise because we're very tight with our information about civil disobedience. And then you continue to flesh out the tweeting. You allow information to come in from the organizers. And if you have time, I tend to ask photographers to put things into Google Drive, but they're busy. And so if I have time, I will take their images off of Signal and I will put it into Google Drive myself, into the folder that we have designated. I think that's kind of your call if you feel like you have the brain space. So in general, the secret is, first thing you do is you deal with the press. You deal with the press release and getting the article on the website. Once those things are done and out in the world, you can deal with social media. And it's going to be your Twitter first. Almost nothing else needs to happen contemporaneously. So if all you do is get out the press release, get the article on the website, and tweet, you have done a good job in the action itself. And just like you stay glued to your Signal messages from the organizers because they're telling you what's happening. And oftentimes it's not at all what you planned, and your tweets need to change on the fly and your article needs to change on the fly. And so that's your main focus. If you can focus on anything else, it's very impressive. And then as the rest happens, you update that article, you continue tweeting. And then immediately after the action, to remind your photographers to get you anything they weren't able to send you as quickly as possible so that you can share it with the world. And your carrot in that situation is to remind them, hello, puppy, is to remind them that the sooner they get you those images, the more likely the press are to use those images and credit them in the newspaper. And there are a few of our photographers that works really well on. And so I use it like a well-known weapon. Is just, if you get those photos into the folder and you put your name on those photos, they could be in the Boston Globe. And if you take too long to do it, the Boston Globe will use someone else's photos. And that's essentially what you're doing in the action, is just getting the information to the journalists, getting the information on Twitter, and staying present. As if you were there in person, but floating a little ways above them, like a very friendly and useful specter. Then the action will wrap up, and that's when actually the hardest work begins. In the action, you're just in like wonderful adrenaline, and then the action's over, and now you've got to really get to work. Update your drafted Instagram post to whatever actually happened there on the ground, which is sometimes unrecognizable from what we planned. Put your Instagram post out. If you have reels that you want to do separate from your post, post those. Get your Facebook post, Blue Sky post, Tumblr post, all of these things that we drafted for ourselves a couple days ago. We update them to reflect reality, and we get them on the internet. Once all of our social media is covered, we do a little retweeting of other people's tweets. If people have shared it on Facebook, we comment and thank them for sharing it. I should say, and I should add this actually to the document, that to always include the press release link include the press release link in your Twitter post and Tumblr post. Any post where you can post a link to your press release, do it. It's a good article. It's technically the best article that will be written about the action because it's the one that we wrote. So it's good to share. It's good to have that be spread across the internet. And then once you've done a full social media sweep, this should be later in the same day of the action, unless it's one of our very rare nighttime actions, in which case you can push it to the next morning. But I recommend, let's try and do it within like 6 hours of that action. You're allowed to, once the action's done, like go have something to eat, drink some water, go outside, see the sky, feel the grass, and then come back in and hit your social media. Check Google Drive folder. Make sure that all the media from Signal made it in. If not, go through the Signal thread, get the photos, get the video, put them in the Google Drive. Start to update that media document we made earlier this week with the news mentions. Try to get a list of who all is mentioning you, put the link so that you are able to track the numbers and also the outlets themselves. And then that's the first round of like post action tasks. Everything I'm going to say now, you can do the next day if you are just absolutely fried. I like to do them the same day, but you don't have to. Email all, and this you will do for the full next week. Email each journalist who reports on the action. When you find an article about your action, you find that journalist's email address and you send them an email and thank them for following this action, for reporting on it so well. Offer them follow-up interviews. Say, I can get you exclusive interviews with the people who were arrested, with the planners. Give these journalists a reason to have a relationship with you. Essentially, make friends with these journalists who have taken their time out of their days to cover climate crisis, which is what we really want, and show them that you're on their team. You want to work with them. You want to collaborate. And something that they might want is an interview. Something they want is exclusive information, and you can give it to them. And so remember, that is something you can give to them that no one else can give, and it is valuable. So use it. Then I'd like to send the news article with some external news links to XR Global so that they can put it in their newsletter. They can share it. I like to let them know what we're doing. You know, I think we all need to hear that everyone's doing something, or we don't, so we don't give up hope. The press release itself can be repurposed to be the main article in the next week's newsletter. It's very easy for me because I also write the newsletter. But if you're not the one writing the newsletter, if you are doing a press release and I'm writing the newsletter, make sure you send me that press release and remind me to make it the main article in the next week's newsletter. And I happily will, because it should be, if we did a good action. Great. That's really the main thing. And then this is not really Remote Media Desk. I put it on the template just so that we remember it exists. But we will always get a lot of bounce back emails when we send a big bunch of emails, because people will have moved to different news outlets. People will have different email addresses. And so someone from M&M, usually a newer member who's like still learning a little bit about the press system, will get the fun job of deleting or changing the bounce backs in our big press media list. Oh, I forgot to say goodbye to Grace. Bye, Grace. And that is the way new members tend to get access to our media list, is they say, hey, I will update the media list with the bounce back emails. And that's how you get to join the media list team in general. And those are the tasks of the Remote Media Desk. So the biggest time is actually the 2 days after the action. You will spend so much time in the aftermath, explaining what happened, following up with journalists, following up with social media stuff. You will get a flood of messages on Twitter and Facebook, and you have to respond to them as quickly as possible, because some of them are media inquiries. One of the big mistakes I made early on was I didn't think to check social media messages. And then weeks later, I would find all these journalists who had messaged us on Twitter saying, hi, I want to write an article. Hi, I want to get an interview. Can I talk to someone? So yeah, you got to do it. Those next 2 days, you just have to stay on it. The action is over for everybody but you. So that's it for Remote Media Desk. You do the planning the week beforehand. You draft your everything. The day of, you are open, you are present, you are sending things out once you are calm, and it is truly time. And it's always later than you think. If you're me, I always think I got to send it out now, but you don't. You can send it out 10 minutes from now and it will be even better. And then the next 2 days, you just dink along, cleaning things up, answering comments, responding to messages. And then about a week after that action is over, you've probably locked in whatever follow-up interviews you're going to lock in, and it's truly done for you. So it's kind of like the holidays if you're the matriarch. Everyone else gets to like show up on the day and have a good day, but no, baby, you spend a month beforehand preparing and a week afterwards cleaning up. And it's great. It's a great job. I love it. So first of all, does anyone have questions about that process before we talk about some of the big important things to remember? You can just flail your arms around. I love how Maxine like very clearly did not flail. It was like, I am anti-flailing. Brian, what's your question?
Just curious if you use anything particular to like draft all this stuff. Like you just dump it all in one Word document. Do you use another thing to draft it? Is it done like actually in social media? Just curious.
Oh, that's a super good question. So you'll notice the encrypted app that I used. It's not an app. It's like a web page. I don't know machines. The encrypted web page that I sent you was a CryptPad document. I very early on in my XR career gravitated toward CryptPad because it's encrypted. It's easy to use. Their spreadsheets are kind of troubled, but their Word document facsimile really works. I tend to draft everything in CryptPads. I draft press releases. I draft my social media drafts. I don't actually draft anything in the social media website itself. I leave all my drafts in a CryptPad document. That's partly for security purposes. It's partly because I don't trust myself to not like accidentally hit post and then panic. I actually think there's probably a lot of security in it that matters. Oh, so if you're not a Twitter person, which you're not, just to remember that Twitter has a character limit. And so every tweet that I draft, I will go into Twitter and put it in the little box to make sure it fits. And then I'll sometimes edit it in the Twitter box to make sure it fits the characters. And then I'll put it back in my CryptPad document. I have been burned by forgetting about the character limit and drafting what I think is just the world's best tweet. And then on the day, putting it in the box and realizing it's twice as long as it can be and needing to edit it on the fly while I'm also sweating and sending a press release. So like, do it to yourself. Check Twitter first. But remember, Instagram and Facebook have almost no limits. And so I can write my big, long essay about fossil fuels in those. But Twitter won't let me do that. Does anyone else have questions about the process itself before we go over like other important stuff to know? We are just blasting through it. You guys are doing a great job. You are keeping up. All right, let's talk about some of the important things. Oh, good. And we talked about this. To invite twice as many photographers as you think you'll need. The attrition rate is high. You normally have little notice. This doesn't mean, oh, we won't work with this photographer again. It's like things come up. This is volunteer work. We're asking people to give their time, their focus, their energy, their resources. It's a miracle that anyone says yes ever to doing something that requires courageous, selfless action on behalf of the greater good. So like, it's fine if people need to cancel. Just invite twice as many and then you won't be mad. It like saves us all being fussy. Let them know and remind them over and over again that their job is to get you photos and videos as fast as possible. Ask them what resources they need to get photos to you as fast as possible. I'm trying to think because I know we have a photographer who needed help doing this, and I think we like helped her get some kind of connector to get her phone to a laptop so that she could like very quickly send things from her laptop because her phone had trouble sending photos. You make it easy for them to get you that stuff as fast as possible, because that is, in my experience, the biggest bottleneck in the process of the day of is just waiting for someone to get you a photo. And if you're like me, you will be texting in that thread saying, a photo, for God's sake, someone send me a photo. And I send the same text every time, and bless them, they are so patient with me because I don't seem to learn to like wait, and they'll get it to me. Yes, Brian has seen, poor Brian witnesses in every action, just my frantic all caps messages demanding photos and videos. And you'll see it again whenever our next one is. It is important, and I've learned this the hard way, when releasing information, accuracy matters more than speed. It is so much better to release press releases, tweets, any kind of post slightly late than too early without proper information. because what you wrote in that press release was a good story. It is almost certainly not what's about to happen. Yeah. And the sooner we can like release that into the wind and know that whatever happens, we have to tell that story and send it, the less stressed we're going to be. Your press release is a draft. And then whatever happens is the final thing. And you just got to roll with the punches and not be too precious about what you had originally written. And what else? Oh, we talked about this, that you really do have something valuable to offer journalists. You have an inside scoop. You have what they need in order to do their job successfully. And so, like, well, really deep down internally, we know we're picking them. For God's sake, please cover us. That tone is maybe not as helpful. And the tone might be like, hey, I'm here to collaborate with you. I have a thing. I have a present for you. Would you like this present? Please email me back. So those are the main things to remember. And I think also to remember is that we're not ever alone. The great thing about, I think, all XR chapters, but I can speak for XR Boston, is that you will always be able to find someone, either whether it's within media and messaging, where a lot of us have been through this experience and are well-trained, or even in the action planning group, you can always find someone who will read your press release, who will look at your tweets beforehand. Never, ever send or post anything without having someone you trust look at it. Someone you trust within our chapter. And again, this is like a big, huge conversation about security, but just to say it so that we've said it to each other, security culture is huge. And if you're on an action planning team, it is your responsibility to protect any information that is shared with you. Protect it as if your friends' lives and careers are on the line, because they are. And so we keep things encrypted. We don't talk about stuff on email. We don't talk about stuff on Facebook Messenger. We don't use it as a cute pickup line that your friends are getting arrested and you're going to watch. No, this is just between us. And it's important to remember that. So when you're thinking oh, who should I have read this press release? Not your professor from college, not your girlfriend, not your aunt who has a career in journalism. No, you can share it with someone else in the planning group. And maybe a member of M&M, but you should preface it by saying hey, Jamie, I have a press release. It's for civil disobedience. And then between the two of us, we can gauge, is this information that I should know? Is this information that it's safe for me to access? Just to get in the habit of doing that, to be this is about civil disobedience. And then gauge if the other person is willing to take on that information, because every single one of us who knows something is a risk. And so we keep it small, we keep it tight. And that's it. Wow. Because I talked at the speed of light, we're really on schedule. I would like to do a round for reactions. I think that can be questions. I think it can be comments. I think it can be thoughts or things that you are reminded of, or that you've experienced in your life that is relevant. You can really just babble until you feel like you've exercised whatever the thoughts or feelings are, and then you can check it to the next person. But I think we should do a round. It's a lot of information thrown at you. I'm going to type a little round order into the chat. This is a truly random order, but I think it will be good. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 4, 5. Great. There's our round order. And so I'm going to check it to Abby. How you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling really grateful for you, Jamie, and all of the rest of you here. Every time I chat with you all, I learn so much and feeling really appreciated. I think especially, I only recently got the logins for our Twitter account, and I'm feeling half-hearted about it, because on the one hand, I was really excited because I'm oh, I can just go ham on the Twitter. This is awesome. And then I was is Twitter even worth it anymore? I don't even know. It seems to be getting worse every single day. So yeah, hearing that, other people are going through that same process with social media and just not really knowing what to do. I haven't heard of Blue Sky, so might look into that because I don't really know anything about it. But I agree. I think we need some sort of backup in terms of social media. And yeah, interesting to hear your process too, on like the day of the action, because a lot of times people don't get me photos and videos at all until like an hour after the action is done. And I'm like, how am I supposed to do anything when that happens? So yeah, I do have one clarification question, and that's around the photographers. Is that you're connecting with people in XR Boston to be photographers? Because when you first mentioned that, my was like, oh, professional photographers. And I was like, wait, are they? Yeah. So any clarification you have on that point? Check.
That's a super good question that I should have clarified. If possible, we like to get photographers from within our chapter. We have a few photographers who are active rebels, like who get arrested, who plan stuff, who take photos for us and don't get arrested on the days they take photos. Those are really the preferable ones. We also have a list of photographers who aren't active XR members, like they don't show up, they don't come to meetings, but they are photographers who have agreed to keep security culture. They're photographers often who are recommended by rebels, and they say like, I have a friend who's a photographer, and then we've had conversations with them and we've explained to them like, you're being shared very sensitive information. If it leaks, we will know who leaked it because the rest of us all know each other and are very trustworthy. So like, don't leak it. I will say that I do not share exact details with photographers until day of. I will share with them in the very early when I say like, hey, are you available? I'll say it's the week of and during this time of day. And I will try to say like if it's in an outdoor location versus in a government space. But that's essentially all I'll give, because I've learned that some people have boundaries where they don't want to photograph things that are happening like in the State House or at City Hall, and they're fine with doing things in a public park. And so that's fine. And then once they've agreed to like, yes, I'm interested. Yes, I want to hear more. Then I can tend to give them the day, the general time, and the general part of town. And then either the night before or the day of, depending on the timing of the action, I will give them the exact location and timing where they should show up. I always tell them like a half hour before they actually need to be there. So yeah, I think it's important to note that if a photographer isn't a rebel, isn't someone that we know within our organization, we have to very carefully parse the information we give to them. To my knowledge, we've never had a photographer leak our information. I don't know if that's lucky or if that's how it tends to go. Yeah, but the dream is to have a rebel who also is good with a camera, and preferably 8 rebels who are good with a camera. But we can't always choose. Did that answer your question, Abby? Yay! All right, then it's Michelle's turn. Oh, Michelle might be frozen.
I think I'm good now. Sorry, I couldn't see the chat, so I didn't know if it was me. Very grateful to listen to everything that you said. It's very interesting. I'd love to actually get involved in doing some of that on a day. I just don't know how it'll fit around my work, but I hope that I'll be able to make that work because it sounds cool and quite exciting. I don't think I've got any questions except, do you do anything on TikTok? I feel like I've seen you on TikTok, but I don't know. That's what everyone's watching.
I forget TikTok because it's the one social media that I do not handle and in fact do not know how to use. One of our M&M members, Harley, is our resident TikToker. I'm sure they would love for someone else to take up the TikTok mantle. because they're very busy, not because TikTok is a terrible chore. They're good at it. They're just very busy. We do have a TikTok. Usually in preparation for an action that I think will be TikTokable, where I think there's going to be like something cool and spicy to show online, I will get in touch with Harley and I'll say, hey, we're going to want TikTok for this action. Do you have the time and the brain to do it in this period of this week? And I cannot tell you what the action is, but I can tell you it might be TikTokable. And usually Harley, our TikTok person, will make time in order to do the TikTok. And that's the reason it's not on our like worksheet for remote media, because it's something that I don't do yet. And if someone is a TikTok person who does remote media, that would be fantastic. And then you could just add TikTok to the list of things that you post on the afternoon after the action. Okay. Oh, sorry. Michelle, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good. Check to whoever's next on that list. Sorry, I can't see it.
Yay, rock on. It's Julie.
Yeah, I think this was like incredibly helpful. And yeah, I just want to say thank you, Jamie, for typing this all out. It's very clear. I feel like this will be like super useful in general in like, yeah, in XR and in any other groups in the future, just like to have a good sense of all of the steps that are required to make an action definitely like successful media wise. So yeah, I don't have a ton to say, but yeah, this was super helpful. So thank you. And I will check to Brian.
Yep, it's basically going to say a lot of what Julie just said. Thanks, Jamie. It's very, very helpful. And I think this document is very good for documenting, standardizing some of the things we've been doing well to make sure that they keep being done well. I have a question. Have we ever, do we ever post in terms of social media to Reddit? I know the Extinction Rebellion channels that could be done, and also news channels.
Reddit is a very good question. Reddit has come up a couple times in conversation. To my knowledge, we do not have a Reddit. The last time we seriously discussed it was shortly after the mooning action in June, and there was some kind of Reddit strike going on. I'm chronically off the internet, and so I had not heard of this. But one of our members said, we can't go on Reddit now. It's very controversial. I don't know if it is still controversial, but if someone wanted to start a Reddit, I think that would be smart. I know that there have been times in the past where members have commented on Reddit posts about us post an action after an action, the kind of people who have the stomach for reading comments and responding. But I don't think we have our own. And I think that's something that we would be open to if a volunteer wanted to jump on it. Check.
Thanks. A check to you, Maxine.
Hey, yeah, honestly, I don't have a ton to say, but just echoing Julie and Brian that I feel like this was super informative, and I appreciate all of the time that everybody put into it, including like asking questions and following up. I feel like I have a better sense of what this sort of work looks like now, and it's been particularly interesting to think about the sort of privacy considerations and the risks of posting too early and stuff like that, because that's things I wouldn't have necessarily thought about coming from mostly just like promoting like school events and different things like that I've done previously. So yeah, but I think that pretty much covers it. But yeah, just thanks everybody. That was this has been cool.
Yay! Maxine, you're the only one. I don't know. Do you live in Boston? Where are you located?
Oh, yeah, I'm in Somerville.
Brian and I are in Somerville in this very moment. Great. Well, I will email you and we'll talk more about media messaging because, yeah, like Julie just said in the chat, like you might fit in very well with our media messaging group. And yeah, we would love to have you. So
Awesome.
yes, I will reach out to you afterwards, because I think you probably had to give us your email in order to RSVP for this. And so we have it somewhere in our clutches. I just have to figure out where. Great. This has been fantastic. It's really exciting to get to talk through the process with people who are like capable and trustworthy, and who I trust that if there was something terribly wrong in the process, someone in this room of smart people would have brought it up. And so I'm grateful, because I've never really shared this with anyone. It's just kind of been like my weird little process. And so it's great to get to workshop it with people who I trust and respect. Yay. And we're right on time. Let's do a little check out. I'm going to say, here we go. Hold on. Media. So what I'm putting in the chat right now is our media email address. If you have questions following up, I think most of you, maybe only Maxine doesn't have this, but if you have questions following up, if you want to reach out afterwards, send me an email at this email address. I'll get back to you as quick as possible. And yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions. I'm always happy to help work through stuff, because I love this. This is what I live for. All right, let's do a little checkout round. We can use the same round order that we used above somewhere. Yes, the Abby, Michelle, Julie, Brian, Maxine order. We can do a little checkout. And I would like to hear something that you learned that surprised you. Maybe that you had not anticipated being part of the gig. Maybe you hadn't anticipated being a part of the planning process, like a tip or a trick that hadn't occurred to you. I want to know the surprises. I will check to Abby.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I think what was really helpful is the 3 very specific questions that you were like, you need to know the answer of these questions before they start, like right at the beginning of your planning process, before an action gets formed, so that everything that follows kind of makes sense. That's something I've been trying to implement in XRDC as they start to like plan some actions in the coming months. Boy, is it hard to get anybody to talk about messaging at the beginning. They're all just like, yeah, well, maybe we need a title for the action. And I'm like, no. This goes deeper than that. So these questions are really going to be helpful as I like go into an action planning meeting tomorrow, actually. So really grateful for that. And I will check to Michelle.
I was just surprised by the whole process on the day where you're coordinating, waiting for your photos and trying to find out what's going on and getting it all on social media. It seems like a good, fun juggling act, but I'm sure it's stressful at the time. And then all the work that you have to do afterwards. So I'm grateful to have that. That's all. Check.
Yeah, who is that checking to? That checks to Julie.
That's me. Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off. I agree. Also, I think like, well, there's so much of this was great. But definitely, the part like for me that's like really interesting to me also is like when you went through kind of like the tone that we want to use. I'm really interested in like that kind of thing and like the sort of messaging aspect. So yeah, that was super interesting. So thank you so much, Jamie. And yeah, I'll pass to Brian.
Yeah. I kind of had an idea of like what happens, like what is done generally. The part that I didn't know or ever think about was how much work goes into it, and maybe more so how much time. Just a month beforehand to up to like a week afterward. That's like 4 to 5 weeks of like one role takes 4 to 5 weeks of work, which from the perspective of other like media messaging roles that are, they're more so the week before or like mostly the day of on the ground. Yeah, just interesting, something to think about and plan for when, if and when volunteering for this role. Yeah, good perspective. Thanks. Check to who's Maxine, I think, is next.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like for me, things that jumped out as surprising, but then suddenly not surprising when I thought about it for a second was the like 6-3 photographer ratio. And other things in that realm include like the way to sort of approach reporters with the information that you have and viewing that as valuable and seeing that as currency, I feel like is like something I wouldn't have thought about. And I feel like my instinct would have been like, please consider like reporting on this. But ultimately, like it's a scoop. It's exciting and it's something that helps both parties. So I feel like that's an important thing to remember when engaging in that way.
Yay. Just so you know, Maxine, that is also my impulse. My impulse is always just to grovel to photographers. And so do as I say, not as I do. If you watch me begging a photographer, just remember you're better than that. And you do have something that is valuable and you are all worthy of their time and attention. Just look the other way when I debase myself for photographers. And yeah, and Brian, your point is good. It is a lot of work, but remember that you always have people who are willing to help you and step in. And you never have to do it as insanely as I tell you to do it. Almost never. Well, this is great. This has been a great group. We're right on time. It's such a pleasure to share space with you all. And you have my email. And thank you for allowing me to record you for all of this time. This recording will be shared with very few people and on our private YouTube access. So this is not going to be seen by your future employers. Great. All right, everybody. It was a good meeting. It was a good checkout. Yay. Such a pleasure to have you. And you're free. You're released into the world.